Hi, my name is Catherine Versillo. I am a writer, artist, and researcher exploring the complicated relationship between health and creativity. By health, I mean many different things. Holistically, I mean physical health, mental health, emotional health, psychological health, financial health, circumstance, and how that impacts creativity. I have found over about 20 years of research and interviewing people and lived experience that we tend to find our health impacted in 6 different areas of creativity: creative process, content, medium, productivity, identity, and business or sustainability. And there's all kinds of complicated ways that happens, and there's all kinds of amazing ways that we adapt and are resilient and figure out how to create in spite of or with those challenges and those constraints. I write at Substack Create Me Free, which is the name of my business, and I have developed a framework or methodology that I call Creative Health Cartography that helps people map out those impacts in order to better understand the patterns and understand blocks and find what works for them. I deeply believe that there's nothing wrong with the way you create unless it feels wrong for you, and that you have answers and tools within yourself to navigate to the kind of creativity that you would like to have, but sometimes you need assistance finding those patterns. So that's what I do. This is the Creative Health Cartography podcast. It's the Create Me Free podcast, but we're starting by going through the Creative Health Cartography workbook that I have recently published. This is a tool that uses my framework to allow you to do a self-guided journey through the different areas and figure out blocks for yourself and solutions for yourself, I hope. So the podcast will eventually be many things, but right now what I'm doing is I'm working through the workbook in order, on camera, live. I have some notes here, but I don't have a script here, so bear with me. This is only episode 2. I'm learning how to do all this. The podcast is being filmed on video on Substack, where you can join me. So 1 episode a month, including this one, will be free. And that's the one that gives kind of the overview of the chapter. So today we're going to talk about creative process. We're beginning that chapter, and I'll explain what it is and what we're going to go into in the coming weeks. And today's is free. If you are interested in the rest of the podcasts that are in the creative process domain, then you can sign up to be a paid subscriber to Create Me Free on Substack. And I would be grateful for anyone who is interested in doing that in order to support the work that I'm doing. I have been working for myself, doing freelance, independent, creative art and writing for 20 years now. Actually, a little bit longer, but I moved to San Francisco 20 years ago, and I kind of marked that as the beginning, even though I did a little bit of this work when I still lived in my hometown in Tucson. So it's not easy, and I keep pivoting, and I'm super excited about this workbook and the work that I'm doing right now. I truly feel that many, many years of the work that I had been doing has come to fruition here, and I'm very excited to share it with you. So that's what I'm doing. This podcast is video on Substack, but you can also listen to it as just audio. I believe I set it up correctly, that it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all of those. So I have some notes, but not my script. I didn't want to work with a script because I really think of this as more like vlog style or more conversational. I don't believe in trying to be perfect at things. I am the first to admit I'm not going to edit this, at least not right now, you know. I'm just going to put it out there, and hopefully you will find something within it that is useful for you. I try to operate off of the belief that it is my job to put my truest, most authentic, genuine work out into the world, and that it will then find the people it is meant to find. Some days I believe that more than others, but mostly I believe it. So I'm putting this out there, and I hope that it finds who it's meant to find. Okay, so couple words. Let's define a couple words. So health, I already talked about. Health means a lot of different things. It's, it's wellness, but it's chronic illness, it's acute illness, it's neurological conditions, it's neurodiversity, it's the impact of caregiving, it's the impact of trauma, it's things related to aging. All of these are creative health. All of these are health, and they all impact our creativity. So kind of the premise of my framework is that when you look at what's going on in the body and you look at what's going on in the mind, and you unite those things because they are not separate, and you look at what's going on in the system around you, you can identify patterns. And then as those patterns become more visible to you, you can make choices about how you want to adapt, and how you want to perceive things, how you want to frame your narrative in a way that is more useful for you. So I don't think I have specific answers for you and how you should live your creativity. I have lots of examples that I'll give. I have lots of ideas. I will share my own experiences, but we're all different in our health needs. We're all different in what creativity means to us. And we're different at different times. You know, creativity at times has meant a living to me, and at times has meant something I'm doing, things I do by hand to express myself in the world, and sometimes a combination of that. And that's just, you know, off the top of my head, a quick example. So I believe you have the answers. I hope I have some tools to help you get to them. So when I talk about health, just know that I'm talking about it really broadly. Let's see. The other word is process. So the first section of the workbook is on creative process. And, you know, I went back and forth a lot while I developed this framework. I could look and point really clearly to some of the other specific areas. So productivity is an easy one. Illness impacts productivity. Most of the time it slows down productivity, but that's not all it does. It can speed it up. If you think about mania or hypomania or even anxiety, it can change what productivity looks like or what it means to you. Even the relationship with the concept of productivity itself is arguably a health and systemic thing. So that productivity, content, people's content can change because of their illness. They might write about their illness, for example. That's content. Process is kind of, you know, it's kind of everything else and all of that too. And as I was developing this framework, I really wasn't sure if I wanted to try to narrow that down even more, if I wanted to, in putting it together in this workbook, if I wanted it to be first or last. So process is really just how we create. It's everything that goes into creating. And I ended up deciding to put it first because when people think about health impacting creativity, at a broad level, we tend to think about process. So yeah, so when people, I think when people come to this work, they often feel like something's going on wrong. So someone says, I can't create right now, I have a block. That's all kind of process. I might be coming from somewhere else, which you can get to, but it feels like process. It starts with process. So I feel like that's a good place to start. It tends to be where, I hesitate to use the word symptoms, but if you look at certain symptoms of things that are uncomfortable in your creativity, you can point to different areas of health, of the relationship between health and creativity. And symptoms tend to show up broadly in process. So do I want to say more about that? I guess if I wanted to, let's see. Okay, so let's say you have an artist or let's say you have a writer who things were going flowing fine and they were working, you know, fine for themselves, and then they've had a really difficult year and they come to a session with me. I do mapping and navigation services, so this is not therapy because I'm not a licensed therapist, but it's therapeutic kind of pattern finding conversational work to assist people in working with their creative blocks and understanding their creative health. So someone comes to me and she says, my process, my writing process is broken. I don't, it's not good. Okay. Well, what does that mean? what does the process mean? And it means the way we make things, but it also means more than that. It means, so she's probably thinking, I'm not writing. I'm not writing the way I want to. I open the document and the blank page stares at me, or I stare at the blank page, however you want to phrase that, and nothing happens. So that's that's accurate. And it's also probably not complete. So there are a lot of different stages of process that are more than just the act of making itself. So creative process is how we make, but it's not only the act of, writing from beginning to end of a page or painting on a canvas. It's everything that goes into before and after and during all of that. It's the thinking, the planning, and the anticipation, and the learning, and the reviewing, and all of the things. So there's different frameworks for this, but I generally have found there's 6 kind of areas of process. So I'll go through them, but let me name them. So preparation, preparing to do your work. Inspiration, slightly different than preparation. Your routines and rituals, so that's kind of the sitting down how we make. The physicality of making, so that's the also sitting down how we make from a different lens. I will distinguish that in a second. Reviewing, revision, editing, changing, and then the last stage is sharing. So this makes me think too of there's different types of joy, and I want to say this concept comes from Gretchen Rubin, but it may come from somewhere else. I have all these things in my head that I've learned over years, and but it's about joy and about how there's joy isn't just in the activity, it's in the anticipation of the activity, the actual moment of the activity, and then in the reflection back on the activity. So it's kind of a similar thing. Our creative process is all of it, including the last part, which is sharing. Sharing our work can mean many different things: exhibits, publishing. It can also mean the choice not to share. Part of the creative process is doing something to express yourself that you determine doesn't need to go out into the world. All of that is, yeah. So let me talk a little bit more about each of those. Preparation. Before you begin making something. I love preparation because I love research. I want to read all the things. I get interested in a topic and I read and research and talk to people and watch. I don't watch a lot of videos, but I will watch like documentary type stuff. Listen to podcasts. Mostly I read. I learn best through the written word. So that's a key part of my creative process, is researching in that way, but it's kind of the work of it. And some people hate that part of the creative process. Some people want to get in there and make, and maybe you don't need a lot of that preparation, but you probably need some some level of that is usually part of the creative process. Inspiration's interesting because it can come at any stage. It can come before the preparation. You get inspired and then you want to learn, so then you start preparing. But it can come when you're working on something and you suddenly see it a different way. It clicks a different way. You get inspired to do something different. It can even come later when the thing is all done. But you find yourself sharing it differently or viewing it differently when you share it. I have books that I've authored years and years ago, and I see them differently now, and I share them differently now. And some of that comes from something that inspired me anew. Usually the inspiration comes early on and in a creative process, but that's a very broad statement. Routines and rituals are, so when I say they're the things that we do, they are the making, but they're more the things around the making. So you might always make coffee before you sit down to write. You may light a candle before you sit down to crochet or weave. You might take a walk to process your ideas before you sit down and paint. It's all the rituals and routines that you do, consciously or not. We tend to do these things, sometimes really subtly, sometimes unconsciously. The more we can recognize them and what does and doesn't work for us, the more we can actually make this stage of the creative process like really thrive and serve us, and also make it more fun. But basically, these kind of tell the body, okay, we're going to be making something. The body mind as a single thing. We're going to be making something now. Get in the making place. Which brings us to the next stage, which is the making. The creative process, the physicality of making something. It's your hands on the keyboard, the piano, the guitar. It's the fabric. It's the making. It's the actual making of the thing. When we think of creative process, oftentimes that's the part we're thinking about. Okay, from the making, that's part of it. That's a key part of it, but it's not all of it. So after the making, there's review and revision. Writers tend to know this pretty well because editing is such a built-in part of the process, but it's really just, okay, I think I'm done. No, wait, I'm not done. What am I doing here? It's the reason this is a different part of the creative process is it has a different texture, a different focus, a different kind of attention and intention than the actual making. You're making in this and you're drawing from the inspiration, and you might go back and prepare more. These aren't necessarily linear steps in a process, but you're mostly done with that first chunk of the work and you're revising it, reviewing it, thinking about it differently, and it's just kind of a different quality part of the process. And then sharing. So everything that happens between I finished it and it's going in the world or it's not going in the world. Okay, so those are the 6 parts of creative process, and our health, again, broadly, can impact any of those areas, usually more than one. And impact, I want to say, it's not a bad thing. It can feel bad if we want to make a certain way and our health, for whatever reason, is preventing that. It doesn't feel good, but it's not bad. It just is how it is, and learning about it and navigating it can shift it. So creative process. Do I want to get into theory? So I tend to nerd out a lot. I mentioned I really like the research part of stuff. um, okay, so I do have in my notes some stuff about theory, and okay, I'll nerd out a little bit. Hopefully you guys like this part. I'm hoping to kind of get into a flow with each of these episodes where I have kind of work on this and then I work on theory, and then so there's specific sections. That way, if there's a section you aren't particularly into, you would be able to fast forward. I have podcasts I listen to that I do that with. If there's only one part that I'm really into, I hope to kind of land on that, but I don't quite have that format down yet. So kind of theory and history and my experience and my thoughts are all kind of tangled together here. But right now, a little bit of like history theory of creative process. So I tend to look at it in kind of 2 different histories or traditions. The laboratory tradition is kind of the academic tradition. So it's kind of the, for lack of a better term, the white cis male version of how creative process has been named and developed. And it's actually can be really helpful in a lot of ways. It's the form a lot of us know. So kind of really broadly, that's the concept of stream of consciousness, like William James, late 19th century. Stream of consciousness was kind of the start of kind of creative process as a tradition, as a named thing. And then about 20, 30 years later, Graham Wallas, who was a British political scientist, wrote The Art of Thought, I believe is the name of the book, which has a 4-stage model of creative process, similar to what I just talked about, a little different. His 4-stage model is preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Also really fun framework in terms of the names. So he was actually looking at the creative process of like mathematicians and scientists, which I think is just an interesting part of the history, because sometimes those people tend not to think of themselves as creative. A lot of times when I work with people in my work, they don't think of themselves as artistic. And then when you think about the creativity of math and science, that's also creative. So that model of creative process from Wallace was built on that originally. So a lot of the way we talk about creative work academically is through that lens, which is kind of interesting. The example that then comes up the most often is the concept of flow theory. People talk about flow theory all the time. There's a lot that I love about flow theory, and I bring it up a lot. I've recently been thinking about the limitations of flow theory, which is something I'm going to get into later. But flow theory, when you get into the flow of things, uh, that creative process of kind of losing yourself in the flow in the moment. So that's kind of the overall laboratory approach. And like I said, that can be valuable. However, it can also be limiting. It tended to be drawn from mathematicians and scientists in the early 20th century, therefore mostly white males, who generally had stable health and support from the system. So there are things about creative process that it suits, and that's not everyone's full creative process. So the other tradition that I look at, I don't know if it even has a name, disability informed, feminist informed, cultural studies. It's an aspect of creative research that looks from all of these different lenses that aren't that dominant tradition. Some examples from the past. I'll just name a few of the people and how they fell into this. I will be going over some more of this later as it comes up, but in terms of just kind of the history paralleling that laboratory theory, Dorothy Richardson, she was a novelist who did stream of consciousness writing. So she published 13 volumes of a novel called Pilgrimage. And I think she published them over like a really long period of time. I want to say like 40 years, but it would have been like mid 20th century. And it was all stream of consciousness writing. And that was a kind of, I just offer that as a counterpoint to the stream of consciousness process that came from like William James. So kind of parallel. And I have Virginia Woolf listed in my notes, mostly because of A Room of One's Own. She kind of argued that the material conditions that we have or don't have, a room, money, space, freedom, etc., impact our creative work. So that's kind of names one aspect of what I'm talking about here, right? That those circumstances impact our creative health. I have a bunch of others listed here: Audre Lorde, Alice Walker, Gloria Anzaldúa, Bell Hooks. I'm going to get into these later, probably. And there's also, throughout the workbook, there are little small examples of where this comes in the creative process. I know that I talk specifically about spoon theory, also part of the process. So some of that's in the workbook, and then I write a lot about this stuff on Create Me Free. So I think I'll stop there, other than just to say that, so my own work, the Creative Health Cartography, is kind of informed by all of this. I take what suits me and I blend it with all the things that I've researched, and I combine it all together, and this is what I've come up with that works for me, that works from my understanding, and I share that so that other people can then take what's right from my view and use it and benefit from it and add to it and subtract from it and do what's right for them. So I would say the main things that I take away, though, from the laboratory tradition are kind of the stages, the flow stuff. Also, nervous system research probably falls into that category, and there's a lot about the nervous system that indicates what's going on for us health-wise. So that probably comes from there, although stuff from the body and is part of lived experience, and that comes from the other traditions. So creative process, it's not separate from any of that. We don't make in a vacuum. We make in our kitchens and our rooms and our lives, what we have to take care of children and parents and pets and ourselves and our own health stuff and money stuff and systemic stuff. So I think that's all I want to say about that. I have a note here. I apologize for my pauses, although I also know that I tend to talk fast and cram a lot in, so maybe the pauses are actually a little bit useful. So what I'm looking at here is just a note that I made called, I was talking about the Wallace model again, and that's the one, the mathematician one. And for an artist with a stable nervous system, the incubation period can be a productive period of background processing where attention is elsewhere. So this is an example of, if you're healthy, incubation might just be kind of happening in the background unconsciously. For an artist with significant anxiety, though, or someone who's going through that at that time, incubation can become rumination. We can cycle through those thoughts endlessly. So if we look just at, a chart of different parts of the process, incubation or preparation can sound like it's the same for everybody, but it's not the same. Any part of our framework of our creative process can be impacted by any part of our health. So that's what a creative process. We're going to work through the workbook. What I'm doing here is kind of looking at that arc of the full creative process, and I'm going to look at different aspects of it. So I'm going to just tell you now what's in this section of the workbook, and this will give you an idea of what the next 4-ish episodes, 4 episodes are going to cover. So we're going to work through creative process. Every section starts with a Dear Artist letter. I write these on Sundays on Substack. It's I try to picture an artist who has a specific area, block, concern, and I try to express what that might feel like, and that it's normal and valid because you're having it. So, you're human. That's what it is. So there's a Dear Artist letter. I believe in this one, it is about starting and not finishing. Yes, Dear Artist who starts but doesn't finish. So as you can glean from that creative process, you can start and you can't finish, and why, and what's causing that, and what's the underlying stuff about that, and what do you want to do about that, and what has worked that you have already done, and how do you judge yourself about this, and how can you let go of your judgment about this? So it starts with Dear Artist, and then I share a little bit about what creative process is, and I tell you a story. So I have stories in my workbook that they're composite stories from different people I've interviewed over the years. I've interviewed a lot of different artists, writers, musicians, performers, and I've interviewed them in different formats and different places over time. For 8 years, I was a columnist for Happily Hooked Digital Magazine, which is a crochet magazine, and every month I interviewed someone about how crochet helped them heal. So some of it comes from that, some of it comes from more recent studies and interviews with people. So I didn't want to put specific interviews with an individual person in this workbook for various reasons. But I wanted to share the gist of what I've learned from those interviews. And so I have a story in here that is about a specific person, but it's been changed a little bit to not entirely be about her. And it's about how her process changed, and what that was like for her, and how she came to understand it differently. You can read the whole story in the workbook, of course, but I'll tell you it ended. She told me she still misses the long sessions sometimes, the long sessions of working. She used to be able to work much more uninterrupted, but she does not miss the person who thought there was only one way to be an artist. So that line came from the specific person I was thinking of when I wrote this, but also that's something I've seen a lot of people experience, that I've experienced myself. There's not one way to be an artist, even for your own self over time, and letting go of those expectations of yourself can be just super powerful and freeing. So in each section, there is signs of a block. So that's what we're calling our symptoms. And then adaptations. So these are your strengths. These are the things that you've learned to do as a result of a block in your creative process that you might want to just pause and celebrate. So I am definitely not going to read all of these, but signs of a block, not being able to finish your work is one of them. I already named that one. if you need perfect conditions to create, so I can't create unless it's Monday morning and it's totally quiet and all the kids have gone off to school and there's nothing interrupting me and the laundry is all done, or I can only create at a specific coffee shop while I'm having a certain kind of coffee and it really only works for me late at night. Some of these are totally valid parts of your routine and process, and others might be a sign of a block. Self-isolating, anxiety, you can only work in one burst, so you can't stop and come back. Any of these things indicate perhaps something's going on with the process section of things. And then as far as strengths, so learning to work in small contained units rather than long sessions. Sometimes you just learn to do that because you have to. Your body cannot work in long sessions anymore, even though that's what you would like to do, doesn't work. So you learn to work differently. That's an adaptation. And we can grieve that we can't work in the longer way anymore, but ultimately it serves us better if we see this as a strength that we learned this other way. Looking at my list. Another one I really like is the adaptation of learning how to develop multiple entry points into the same project. So you kind of trick yourself into, oh, the process isn't working. Oh, I'm going to go in through the back door. I'm going to enter the work this way instead of that way. It's an adaptation that that people have come up with. So let's see. I want to see what else I have in my notes here. Let's see. Oh, I named in my notes that I was going to name some of the blocks. I did list 3 different blocks specifically, so I'll go ahead and share those because they're kind of broad, but I think they're very useful too. So the block of consistency. So you can sustain your work for hours every day, or you can't, and it changes every day. So most of us with health issues most of us as humans, I mean, really, don't do the same thing consistently every single day in our creative work. So trying to sit down and do it can be difficult. If you have a lot of trouble with consistency, then perhaps something's going on with your health that makes consistency really challenging for you. And that's something to look at. And that's why. Why is that happening? What can you do about it? How can you see it differently? If you have a health condition that flattens you some days and you don't have the spoons for it, spoon theory, like I said, was in this one, it's useless to mourn that fact over and over forever, or blame yourself or wish it were different. It's understanding that it's not your fault. It's not a question of your motivation or your persistence or needing to tie yourself to the chair and write, which a lot of creative advice can be useful to a point, and then it's limiting when you have health issues. Yes, it is good to try to write every day as a writer. Also, that is bad for some people, as an example. So consistency, if you're having issues with consistency, sign of a block in creative process, as opposed to a block in content or medium, for example. Yeah, I'll share what I wrote here. I think I pretty much just said this, but my note that I made to myself was to share with you that most of the language we have for inconsistent creative output is the language of discipline. If you're not consistently creative, you're undisciplined, you're unreliable, you're flaky, you don't follow through. And we internalize that, and it's moralized. It's not accurate. It's a way we shame ourselves and others for not doing like machines every single day the same way. So we can start describing ourselves as flaky. Oh, I'm an artist, but I'm really flaky, or I'm flaky because I'm an artist. There's all different kinds of narratives around this. But you're not undisciplined necessarily. You're just going with the energy that you have on that given day based on your health. So a lot of what I work with is learning to look from the inside of your actual own experience, not from the outside judgment of this kind of moralizing language that we have. Consistency. The next symptom of a block here is the block of completion. So again, that's I can start, but I can't finish, which we talked about a little bit. But so this can be different things, and you really have to get to know yourself. Sometimes you can't finish because you're dealing with perfectionism, and since you can't do it perfectly, then you're not going to finish it at all, kind of thing. But that's not necessarily what it is. It can also be you might have an internal pressure to finish things in a certain amount of time, or to finish things in one sitting, or this idea for yourself that if you don't catch it right now, then you're not gonna catch it. Um, so then you stop, and then you can't find your way back into the work. And again, totally valid. I've had that happen. Also, there's a different way of looking at that and a different way of framing that. So instead of saying I can start, but I can't finish, I'm great at starting, and I have challenges with coming back to the work. What are those challenges about? You can look at those, and then essentially what you want to probably do is learn how to trust the continuity of the work, the belief that it will be finished, that you can finish it. Or you might want to redefine what finished means to you. There's a lot of ways that might be dealt with, but it manifests as not being able to finish. And then the third block that I have listed here is the block of avoidance. So if you're avoiding finishing your work, again, you might shame yourself, that internalized monologue. Well, I'm lazy. I'm not doing the work. I'm lazy. I should be doing the work. I should. There's probably a reason you're avoiding it. A lot of times it's trauma. The creative work is really triggering. It touches really vulnerable parts of ourselves, and that might be just your body and mind protecting you from something. Yeah, that's just an example. So a lot of times these blocks, I guess what I'm trying to say is these blocks are often named as character flaws. Something's wrong with you because you don't create this way. No, not true. Something's wrong with the system that asked you to create in a certain way, that made you think that there was a certain way to create. Nothing's wrong with you. You're not lazy, you're not undisciplined, none of those things. So I tend to look at blocks as just information. This is just information about what's easy for me, what's hard for me, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and then I get to think about what do I want to do with that. So I have an example of what like shifting your framework would look like. So you have an artist. Let's say you are an artist. You are an artist who paints, and you wanted to get a certain set of paintings done, but it's been 6 weeks and you haven't painted anything. So the framework you might be working with is, I should be doing this. I am creatively blocked. I'm undisciplined. And then that can just like spiral right into shame. I'm not even an artist. I'm wasting my life. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Blah, 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 blah. Does this sound familiar to anyone? We can be so hard on ourselves. One of my goals for myself that I also have for any of you is to just learn to be gentler with yourself. So instead of those shaming things, if you just look at it as information, I have not worked in 6 weeks. What's that about? It's my health. What's going on with my health? If I'm not sleeping and I'm stressed about something, and my breathing's really bad because of allergies or fires or whatever is going on, and I can't think clearly, maybe all of that is what's causing me to not work right. Maybe there's, again, something from trauma that's coming up. Is something triggering me that's making me want to avoid the work? Do I have a schedule right now that doesn't support the kind of work I think I want to be doing? So I want to make large scale paintings, but they take a lot of preparation to set up, and I don't have a situation right now where that's easy. So then I just avoid doing it. It's just information. And then you get to look at that information and decide what you want to do with it. So let's see. I have notes here about adaptations, but I don't think I'm going to go into those right now. No. I did make notes about myself. So I'll go ahead and share this because I think sharing about my own experience is probably more useful. So the note that I have here is I used to write. I tried to write. First of all, I tried to write from beginning to end of something, but then I also tried to write like with a main idea, the way you learn in school, right? The 5-paragraph essay extended to whatever different form. And if I couldn't write that way, then I couldn't write. And so I was blocked and I was all those negative things. When I began to think about what that block really means, one of the adaptations I came up with, like I said before, was coming into the work from multiple different entry points. So sometimes that's going back to research and preparation, which can be a form of avoidance, but it can also be very useful. Sometimes it's editing something from before. Sometimes for me, a tool was to stop writing at a point where I knew I still had something left to say, make a note of what I wanted to say so that when I came back the next day, that's where I could start. And it just was easier to get in that way. Realizing I didn't have to write from start to finish with this point and that point. And yeah, so that's an adaptation, learning how to come in differently. It allowed me to accept that some days my brain, body, whatever was not going to be able to work in that super linear, concrete way. And learning about that for myself ended up being super useful to let me see that I can work anyway, if on most days. I just need to figure out what work looks like on those days. So that's an example of an adaptation. Let me see, I have a few more notes here. What else do I want to say? So, I mean, we're coming kind of to the end of this episode. So like I said, this is the overview episode of Creative Process. I'm going to be talking about all of these things in a lot more detail with theory, with my own experiences, with better examples, I hope. There's creative exercises in the book, so I'm going to do some of those exercises on camera so you can see what that looks like. There are reflection questions in each chapter, and so I'm going to look at those reflection questions. I'll go over a few from my own experience. I'll pull one out just really quick from the list. If you could give your creative process a different name, so not my practice, not my work, not my process, but something that captures what it feels like from the inside out, what would you call it? So that's an example of something. I'm not going to answer that right now, but I will answer that perhaps in a future episode. So yeah, so reflections, and then after 3 to 4 episodes, I'll probably be done with the process chapter, and we'll go into the next section, which is creative medium, how health impacts creative medium or the materials that we use. But we're going to be sticking with process for a little while here. So what did I want to wrap up with? Well, I kind of started with this, but I basically have a note here that why are we starting with process? Again, it's because most people understand the concept of process, that health impacts process in some way. It's just broad. It covers kind of everything, and then we can dig into it in different sections and areas. It tends to be what we notice. Something's off. We're not working the way we want to work. We're not getting the thing done the way we want to. We're not, yeah. So, I don't know. I have notes here. I'm sorry. No, I'm not going to apologize. I'm trying to figure out the things that I want to say to you each week, and this is all still really new. And I think all I want to say at this point is that I hope that you are feeling well in some way today. I hope that you have some thoughts for yourself about what creativity means to you and what health means to you and what creative process might mean for you and what the different stages of it are and how you relate to the idea that the preparation, the inspiration, the sharing of the work, how does that relate to process? Do you consider that part of your process? If you're just laying there thinking about the work, is that part of your process? So just something to think about. Yeah, and you are welcome to message me if you want to share any of those thoughts. createmefree.substack.com is the best place to leave comments. I'm also on Instagram at createmefree, but I'm not there as often as I am here. So that is episode 2 of the Create Me Free podcast, exploring creative health cartography. Again, I'm Catherine Versillo, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you.